So section 11.1 looks at power functions, and proportionality is introduced later in the section. But to begin with, so what we talked about in class on Wednesday is a power function is a function where there's a constant that's multiplied by the variable x, and then that gets raised to a power, hence the power function name. And that power, the k is a constant. It helps stretch the graph like to the y-axis or flattens it away from it, but it doesn't actually shift it and have any movement to the left, to the right, up or down. That will come later with polynomials. And then the p, the power itself, is also a constant, and what that is will drive the shape of the function with respect to the graph. So that constant could be a negative exponent, a positive exponent, it could be a whole number, an integer, or it could be a fraction. And that fraction could be proper, where the numerator is smaller, like 1/2 or 1/5 or 2/3, or the fraction could be improper, where the numerator is larger than the denominator, like 5/2 or 3/2 or 8/7. So those are your possible constant power options for the power function in this section. And so in lieu of class, I'm going to have you look at that Desmos tool that I posted in As You Learn. So if you go to the website and look under week 5, there are 2 online graphing tools posted. One is Desmos lesson 11.1 power functions and proportionality, and the other is 11.2, 11.3 with polynomials and their behavior. So if you click on the 11.1, I just wanted to show you quickly how to use this tool that's here. The graph is here on the right, and then on the left are some notes as well as some functions that you can click and make them active. And you can scroll down and see it's like a little mini lesson on power functions. So back up at the top, you'll notice that you've got the very first line is power functions. They're in the form k times x to the p, where k and p are constants, and then it talks about how k will stretch or compress the graph, which means flatten it, and if k is negative, it reflects it. And then here on like line 3, with this power function format, the little circle that's on the left, if you click that circle, it will turn the graph on. And underneath it are 2 coefficients or constants, the a and the k. And you can press the play button, but you can use the slider bar, and it will change the coefficient or change the power. So like there is, let's just make the coefficient k1. So there is, x squared. And then if I move the a slider to 4, there's x to the 4th, then x to the 6th, x to the 8th, x to the 10th. So you can see when the power is an even positive power, that the graph takes the same U shape that we talked about in class Wednesday. But that just lets you play around with what the power does. And then you can unclick the graph to make it go away. You can scroll down some. Then you have some talking points that tell you about, if k is positive, p is even, and what the output does. And then you can go down, and then there's another, like option 8 is a g function, where the power is going to be tagged to be odd, and that has a little different shape. So it has you could look at q to the 3rd power, or x to the 3rd power, x to the 5th power, x to the 7th power, x to the 9th power. I mean, you're welcome to play around with this website, but it has you look at what that power does, how it changes the shape of the graph, and that an x to a positive odd power will have that shape. Okay? And then again, you can just unclick the circle on the left and make it, the graph go away. And then read through the lesson, play around when the power is negative, a negative integer. So like negative 2, negative 4, you can zoom in if you need to. Should be able to zoom in and look at what happens to the graph. Asymptotes come into play. Domain and range will be discussed, but like I said, you can click the graph, the little circle to the left of the graph, and it makes it turn on. You can press the play button, and it'll change whatever variable's been set, or whatever In this case, the power has been set to change. Fractional powers. There's a little stint here on fractional powers. So again, you can just turn on the graph, and directly below it is where you can click and play with the slider tool. And this is power function where the power is a fraction that's in between 0 and 1. So it has that sort of like half of the parabola that got put sideways over in quadrant 1. And then the other one, if it's a power that's a fraction, but it's bigger than 1. Or, bigger than 1. So it almost looks parabolic, but only the right half of it. So again, just play around with those. Then there's some examples on how to actually find power functions, and I'll be posting some separate videos for those in As You Learn, but you're welcome. You know, this is live. You play with it, click the graphs, play with the functions, and see how the power affects the shape. And then once you've done 11.1, 11.2 looks at polynomials. And polynomials just take power functions, and it might, it adds a bunch of them together. So right here, a polynomial is a sum of power functions. So the terms have coefficients, and you can look at which one's the highest power. And so you, again, clicking through here, you can turn some of the graphs on, like those two x squared, and see how adding more terms will affect the shape. You can do the same thing to those x cubes, where you have the original x cubed function, but then when you start adding other terms, it changes the shape. But it still has that same end behavior that we talked about. What happens when x gets really big? What happens when x gets really small? Like we talked about Wednesday in class. So just read through the wording, turn the functions on, look what happens, watch for videos, and As You Learn, try your homework, and if you have questions, you can always email me for help.